Hello, everyone. My name is Simon Bevy. I just want to invite you to this live conversation. Thank you for all of us who are joining us, um, women, and I'm sure there are a few men who also have joining, and that's okay. We want to welcome you, but we are doing this especially for the women. So it's an intentional moms forum. Um, and it's a pleasure for me to be able to do this. We intend to do a little bit more of this because the time is just limited. And the title today is for this Intentional Moms Forum. And I know some of you have attended before, and we have had many conversations. Unfortunately, because of the time and the weight of the subject, I've not been able to host my wife, who has a lot to contribute, and she's going to be contributing in our conversations in next sessions, and also a few other women leaders and mothers that I usually host for this forum. But we're just going to go at very high speed to cover a little bit more than we would have done in this short time. And so I just want to invite you and ask you to host some watch parties so that you bring in more people as we talk about this very important subject today. And so today we're talking about parental guidance, and this is really important at a time like this. We're going to be talking about guiding your children on three issues, and we'll focus on one really because of time, and that's pornography, social media, and time management. It's a huge topic. This could be an entire seminar. And we're actually going to do some seminar on it, and we're going to be inviting you. It's going to be a Zoom seminar, so a closed seminar so that we have more discussions and some notes in it and presentation. But today we're just going to cover generally and give you some information and ways of controlling your children in this area of porn especially and social media, but we will take it over from there. And so as I said, I'm part of an organization called Transform Nations, and we get to do different programs for the last more than 10 years. We do programs for men, like the Man Enough program, the XY Journey, we call it. And we're actually beginning a new season right now online. And so in case you like to invite your man or tell some men that you know that they would be happy to get involved, there are details right on our page. There's even a link where you could sign up the men for the Man Enough, or you could go just to our Man Enough page and sign them up there. Then we also do EZA, which is for women, like the Man Enough equivalent for women. And we want to invite you as well to sign up. All the details, and there are a few people, Esther and others, Brenda will be chatting you as I continue this conversation, and in case you're interested. And lastly, we have the Intentional Moms program. This combines mothers of sons, which is what we have been doing, those of you raising sons, and then raising daughters as well. We have combined that now, and so we're calling it Intentional Moms Program, and you're welcome to be part of it and to get involved. And again, you can sign up right under our page. The details are there, and you will be able to interact with Esther and Brenda. And so welcome again. Let's jump into this. Again, I invite you, welcome your friends into this conversation. And this is going to be on our YouTube channel afterwards, and you could invite others to watch it. But let me just jump right into it. The last few weeks, I've had several calls from some parents who have said, I caught my young child, one of them, a child who was as young as 7 years old, was actually watching pornography. I know a lot younger children, girls and boys get very interested in pornography, and it has become a huge attraction, especially during this COVID time. And so this is a reality. Of course, they used to be interested on social media and porn before this, but during this season of COVID-19, it's just become a lot bigger, a lot greater invitation, especially for the young people. COVID has increased the interest and involvement and connection of young people. Preteens, even younger, from 5, 6 years old, all the way to teenager, late teenage, to technology, and especially to issues like pornography that we are talking about. And why? Why this season? Of course, there's more time available. Children have a lot more time in their hands because they're not in school. Even though there's home education, it's not as busy and structured as it is in a normal school setting. So a lot more time available for the young ones during this time. A lot more gadgets in use because of home education and because of the season. So even children who never used to have a phone, and now they need a phone to make do, especially in their classroom and all of that. My daughter never used to use an iPad. My little daughter never used to use an iPad or never needed a phone even for communication because she's 10. But right now, because she needs to talk to the teacher, she has had access to our phones and gotten to use them. And so with that increased use or connection into gadgets and the internet, and of course, many more parents getting home internet because of school education, homeschooling, then that's a lot more people are online than it was. Maybe 3, 4 times. I think the research is still being done on the impact of the COVID season on the use of the internet. And then, of course, we have many more idle minds, especially the young people with a lot more time and idle hours. Then there's a lot of attraction to get to investigate and reach out to things they were not reaching out to before because of the limited activities that they have. You know, they have a lot of energy and they used to use that activity to go out, play. Boys would go out and kick stones and kick ball and do other things and use that energy. Right now, that energy is resident in their body and they want to use it somehow. And I'm sure in your house, you're not providing enough activities for that energy to go into useful activities. And so a lot more energy and used energy that these young people, especially preteens and teens, need to vent out. And so they're going into gadgets, they're going into sites, they're going into research on the internet. And of course, they say an idle mind is the devil's workshop. And so this has just really increased for a lot of people. And of course, technology is very exciting. Compared to you engaging the kids or their teacher engaging them and the excitement of technology and what they could find out, technology is very exciting. It's become a pastime. It's become addictive as well. It's very addictive. You know, these days a lot more. I have to tell my children, put technology down, let's do something else. It's very addictive, it's very exciting. The possibilities are many. The sites that could be explored are, you know, like the big wide ocean and deep ocean. And so technology is not easy to handle it during this time. And of course, while social media and porn and the other contents around it are big right now for preteens and teens, is because they're beginning, you know, they used to have this healthy, of course, they're beginning to have this excitement with the opposite sex and hang out with them and get to talk. And school used to provide that interaction, which was innocent interaction, you know, between boys and girls, between people of the opposite sex. That right now, that is lacking. Very little of that interactions are happening. And so they want them to do those interactions online. online and in the internet. And of course, then the temptation to take it further is huge. Of course, preteens and teens are very curious about sexuality. Some of them are beginning to get into puberty and they're beginning to have the feelings around sexuality, and they want to know a lot more about it. And of course, study of that in the internet will cause them to go even further. So a lot of curiosity. And you remember your time when you were young, and the curiosity that was there. Now you wanted to know certain things and how boys look or girls look and how it goes. And of course, for boys, the curiosity is even higher during this season. And of course, they are living in a very sexualized society. And there's a lot available. You know, you're watching a movie. Yeah, they were watching a movie on a certain site with my kids and, you know, some pop-ups just saying, I'm available for a conversation, a very sexy picture as well. And you have to put that off. So just a lot of invitations in this very sexualized society. Instagram, the pictures that are taken these days from the front and the back and the sides by both men and women are very tempting and inviting for these young people. You know, the peer pressure as well. One boy here, another girl there saying, I looked at this and I watched this, and forwarding a link and another link. It's very irresistible for a lot of these young people. And of course, they are immature. They mature. They say one of the last parts of a brain to mature into the early 20s is a part that helps us make mature decisions about life and sexuality and other things. And so you can imagine all of this that is coming at these young people. And shouting at them and inviting them, and they have to make decisions, and they're young and they're immature, and how much they have to deal with, you know, during the season. So you can just imagine how much distraction, invitation, you know, influence a lot of what is happening out there is to these young people. And of course, you need to remember, especially the boys, this is a big thing. That's why many times in pornography and issues like that, boys get to fall into it a lot more. Why? They're very visual. Boys are very visual. I remember when I was young and we were young boys in class those days, and we just really had a curiosity to want to see how girls look like. And sometimes we'll take these little pieces of glass and put them under the girl's chair. And we couldn't see much, but the thought of trying to see something was very exciting in the mind of a boy, or going to peep, you know, in the river. I grew up in the village when the girls are in the river and stuff like that. Very exciting. Of course, you can imagine now these boys have this available in the internet. They just need to click it and they will see all manner of things available. So nowadays also kids have become a lot bolder than our days. Bolder to, you know, there's a lot of urge to do certain things and a lot of invitations and boldness in this sexualized society. So I'm going to kind of focus a lot more on pornography. And of course, it connects with social media and all of that. But, you know, in other trainings, we're going to get deeper into others as well. So let me focus a little bit more on porn because of a number of calls and conversations online about children just accessing pornography during this season. And of course, even in the mainline media, I've been part of conversations where parents are saying, what do I do? My son has accessed this. My daughter has accessed this. What do I even do? How do I begin the conversation? I'm going to get into that at the tail end. But right now, I just want to define what pornography is and why it's very exciting for these young people. So pornography is any written or audio or visual material. It could be written, it could be audio, it could be visual material that depicts nudity, you know, naked people, and or sexually explicit activities. that just talks about the sexual activity of the body in a sexual way, and nudity for that matter, and that is visual as well, or that is written. And talks about all of these, activities, sexual activities. So whatever written, audio, visual material that depicts nudity or parts of that, or sexually explicit activities. And many times it's all of that causes sexual arousal. So a lot of that at the time the result is sexual arousal or sexual desire or sexual, curiosity to get more into that. So we have what we call soft porn. And soft porn is when that written or audio visual material depicts naked people or scantily dressed people. And highlights mainly their sexual parts, maybe their breasts or genitalia or anything else that is considered, maybe the behind, considered to be sexual, only depicts that. But isn't the hardcore, and hardcore is when it shows all, forms of sexual activity. This could be bestiality, people doing sex with animals, or gay sex, or sex with men and women, or group sex, all kinds of sexual activity. That's hardcore because it gets into the activity and what goes on there. And so really pornography is a big business all over the world, big business. You could read about it and see how much money it makes, a year or a day. All over the world. It's not built to benefit anyone. It's built really to destroy and prey on people's and children's curiosity. It's based on what is perverse. It's not something that builds and instructs and has any values. Now, some people get to argue, pornography is like sexual education. It's helping people understand, these things. And it could be useful for those who are young just to know what this is about and get some education. Well, let me just give you some differences between porn and sex education. All right, number one. Porn is seeking to arouse and invite people into all manner of sexual activity. That's the goal. But the goal of sexual education is to inform, is to educate, is to guide. That's what it's about. So that's a big difference right there. Porn, on the other side, is based on what is perverse or what is deviant sexual behavior. It shows all of these activities that have no consequence, and you can do whatever you will. That's what it's based on. On the other side, sexual education is based on acceptable moral values around sexuality and the practice thereof. So it's guiding, it's showing what is good and what is beneficial and what is helpful for the future. For these young people, especially. On the other side, again, porn teaches a responsible and invites and actually encourages irresponsible sex without consequence, and many times even criminality. That's what it encourages. On this positive side, sexual education is about responsible sexuality. It's how to carry yourself in responsible ways and talks about the consequences of irresponsible behavior. And so in that way, it's selling values and responsibility. Porn obviously harms society and harms the person and the people that get involved and what happens thereafter. So it's harmful. It has tragic effects, and we're going to talk about some of those. And sex education on this other side is to build the person, is to let the person know these are the things available. This is how you can make good choices. And if you make bad choices, you're going to find yourself in a hole. And so it does that. Of course, pornography is based on a culture of lies and fantasy. It's about fantastic imagination and things out there which are not really based on reality and lies about this and what it's going to make you feel and how this other person is enjoying this. In fact, a lot of porn is based on criminality, and you see people being raped or being or children even involved, and it's showing these people like having the time of their lives. And so obviously it's based on lies and fantasy, not truth. But sexual education should be, and is based on truth and reality. This is the truth. This is the reality of temptations and practices out there, and this is how to make your choices. And lastly, pornography degrades women, for example, shows them as sex objects, as bunnies to play around with, and shows like sexuality is more for men, and women are just play objects. The majority of pornography, that's what it shows. It degrades women, degrades sexuality in its entirety, violates them, because you get to see people, many of them who don't want to be seen in that way, but they're paid money to be seen that way, or they're sex slaves and they have to depict themselves in that way. So it violates for sure. And it, of course, it's criminal at times. But on this other side, sexual education is about correcting. So when you teach your children, sexual education is correcting them, enlightening them on what they don't know and what they ought to know. And it's about dignity. It focuses a lot on dignity. All right. I hope if you're just joining us, you understand what we're doing today is Intentional Moms Forum under Transform Nations. And we're talking about PG, or parental guidance, parental controls around social media, pornography, and time management. And really, we may not have time to get into the other two. So we're focusing a lot more on pornography today. We've defined what pornography is. We have differentiated pornography with sex education. And right now, we want to talk about the journey, how people, these young people, especially our children, get invited into this. And some of them get addicted into this. Many parents, before they get to know it, like a few who have called me the last few weeks, their children were already in mild addiction. It wasn't just a casual visit anymore. They had gone the journey pretty far. And so let me tell you the journey so that you may discuss this with your children. They may be aware of it. But also in case your children are further down the journey, then you may know as well where they are at and what to begin to do right away. Excuse me, we encourage your comments, your questions. If we have time, I'll pick up a few of those questions. But if not later, I'll be able to answer them on the Transform Nations page. But host a watch party, invite other people. Let's move on with this conversation. And so let me talk about the journey of porn, where people begin and where they eventually go. And this is both for adults, but we are talking especially about your children. So the journey is, it begins like a joke. You know, you just have a curiosity of this thing pops up, and then you look at it, and of course you get disgusted. You say, well, why would people do such things like that, especially for the young mind? You know, it's a curiosity. Earlier years, between 5 and 8, you know, they know there's a little curiosity about the other sex, but when they see such activity, of course, they get disgusted, and they wonder, what is this? And it's an accident. It's a pop-up. It's something that just happened, and then they see it and say, no, I don't want that. I don't want to go back into that anymore. And it's just something that a visit. It's a visit, a rude, shocking visit to a site or a story by someone else who shares, this is what I saw, and this is what and they may be pretending that they're not disgusted or they're not shocked just to fit in. But later they say, how could people do that? So it begins there where it's an accidental, invite or pop-up or encounter. And, it's just that, an accident. Then it goes, or just a joke, and then it goes to the next stage, which is about curiosity. Now the child is curious. They want to see this again. They might have been disgusted. They may even go back and get disgusted again, but they want to come back again because curiosity is insatiable. It's what killed the cat, because the cat kept coming back. And so this person, young person, wants to come back and check it again, and then come back and check it again, and come back because it gives a high when you see it. It gives a high to this person. Maybe they get to giggle and laugh about it and say, what's wrong with people? And then they want to get back again and go a little bit deeper into, if it was just looking at scantily dressed women or people, now they want to see a lot more. And so it's just inviting them. It's just drawing them in and getting them deeper. When it comes to these kind of temptations, we shall say, it promises you more than it will ever deliver. So it promises you a high, and then you like that high, and you go, you come back again, and it keeps promising you high, and the more you stay, the longer the high takes for you to get it. So you begin to demand a lot more to get to the high that you got in the first place. And it just keeps building. It really in the suspect or the young person, and they just like fish that is being caught. You begin to get, the young person is reeled in even more, and they begin to get deeper and deeper into this. Before they know it, they are regular users. In other words, they go into the internet for it. It's no longer an accident. It's no longer just a curious thought in the middle of some work they were doing on internet. They actually go into the internet for it, or go out for it, or now invite their friend to take a picture and a video and send to them. Now they're regular users. They're looking out for it. They need it. They want it for a high. So it's a joke or an accident, and then curiosity, and the different levels of curiosity gets deeper over time, and now they become a regular user. Now they look for it, they want it, they desire it, they seek out for it. And of course, at that point, it goes deeper into addiction. And it becomes an addiction right now. That it's hard to go for a day or for 2 days or for a week without spending some time into it. And there are levels of addiction at that point. So there's a mild addiction. There's a kind of addiction which, just once in a while you visit, but once you visit, you're hooked into it. You spend some time into it, and then you leave it. 3 days later, 5 days later, you can't get back to it. That's mild. And then you go deeper into average addiction. Average addiction is where you're actually addicted, and it's not only what you watch or listen to or what you read, it's a lot more. You begin to act out. So you begin either to masturbate or call someone else and go through sexting with them or sexual conversations with them. And it's just getting deeper. You're acting out. It's more than just mild addiction. It's an addiction that leads to action or acting out. And then lastly, there's severe addiction. Severe addiction. I've had, the unfortunate chance to deal or help some boys who have been in severe addictions and young people. Severe addiction, even older people, we've had to deal with some of them. And by this time, they're not just addicted to general porn or soft porn or even, gross porn. They go even deeper into what is unacceptable, what is deeper and criminal, like child porn, young people, teenagers and children who are playing out this sexual activity. So they go into that, they go into bestiality, they go into rape, watching rape and getting addicted into it, and many other, crazy ways depicted out there of sexuality. So by that time, they're really far. By that time, it's so deep, it's like addiction to crack cocaine. In fact, they say because of these pictures that are now very emotionally etched into the brain, it becomes as addictive as cocaine. And by that time, it's really hard. They need help. They need assistance by someone else. right? So many times this becomes a secret thing because nobody wants to brag about it until they are deep into addiction. It's a secret. It's something that they hide from parents and other people and hide from their peers. But the more they get into it, the more now they talk with others, the more they begin to exchange these, materials with other young people. And so you will begin to find that your child right now is very secretive with their phone. They don't want you to get anywhere near it. You begin to find then they take a lot more time in their room on their own, locking themselves, or more time in the bathroom with their phone or gadget. By that time, they just want to hide and be somewhere where they can get deeper into this. It's a secret. They need more time on their own, more time than they used to have out there, more time at night, maybe. And when they're private, there's less interest in studies at this time. It can begin to alter their normal behavior if it's really deep into addiction. Instead of studies and other things, now they're hiding, now they're hyper, now they're very secretive, now they're very pensive and very withdrawn. It can affect the normal behavior. That's why as parents, it's good for you. And we are taught during preteen and teenage, it's good to be a student of your child so that when behavior is altered, then you're aware something is going on. It may be porn or it may be, drugs or something else, but you need to be able to say, this is not my daughter anymore. This is not my son anymore. Something is wrong. Something is happening. And I need to do something about it. Or it may be frequent questions that they're having to you about sexuality and weird, maybe questions. For example, I've said before, there was one time I was with just a neighbor who had visited, and my little girl, just walked in, rushed in. I think she was 6 or 7, and just shouted and asked her a weird question and said, Dad, in the presence of someone else, Dad, what is oral sex? Of course, a little shocked, but not plain shocked. I laughed about it and I said, where did you hear that? I said, I had another boy out there, say it loud. And I ran to come and ask you. Now, I was happy that she ran to me, but I was a little shocked and dare say a little embarrassed because my neighbor was there. And then, of course, looking, unperturbed, I just told her, okay, don't go back to that where that boy is, go and play with other friends. I redirected the girl to play with others. And I said, we'll talk later. Of course, talking later was first to help, give me time to compose myself and see what I'm going to say later to her and how to say it. But also number 2 was I needed time to tell my neighbor, hey, by the way, that's not our regular conversation in this house. That was just something that has come up. And so anyway, later we got to talk and ask some questions. And after asking some questions, I realized that boy was probably, having available to him some porn materials and other things they are listening to. And of course, we had the conversation with my daughter and we began, those conversations at that point. And of course, I was able to recover by the time we talked. So anyway, if your child begins to ask you crazy things and demand certain things or begin to touch themselves a lot more and they're grown up and do certain behaviors that may not be within what is normal and acceptable, then you may need to understand there might be an exposure to this thing. And they're beginning to ask questions of things they have seen, of things they have had, and stuff like that. All right, well, let me move on. We're talking about guiding your children around issues, pornography, social media, and time management. But the big focus for today, for you moms especially, is for us to talk about pornography, to understand. We have talked about it and why it's prevalent during this season. of COVID-19. And we have talked about what it is, what is pornography. We have talked about the journey into addiction so that you catch it before your children get to addiction. And right now, I want to talk briefly about the general effects, the tragic effects of pornography to the children. I want to, of course, we can't get fully into it. It's a big subject. I will do that so that I may finish before my time runs out on, a few, practical ways of helping your children to navigate this thing. And so right now, let's talk about, the effects of pornography. And there are many. I just want to mention a few right now. Of course, to the user, it's a huge effect, negative effect. Now, let's talk about your children. They're early and they're being introduced to sexuality. And what they get to see is what is perverse, is what is wrong, is what is criminal maybe, is what is fantasy and based on lies. So it's just a rude introduction and education of sexuality for your children. And when we talk with men and women in both Eza and Man Enough, we get to ask them sometimes when they were first exposed to sexuality, and a lot of them is through porn. And of course, when that happened, they were curious and they got into the wrong places because of that. So it's the first impact of this thing is a bad introduction and education to your children around sexuality. Of course, number two is that it corrupts the mind. Corrupts the mind and causes these children to begin to envision and to imagine and to see things that they were not supposed to see, just corrupting the mind. And of course, they begin to look at their friends and then begin to think about what they saw last night and begin to see their friends in a sexual manner. So it takes away the innocence of interactions with the opposite sex. Takes away the innocence of it. So whenever they interact with boys or girls, then they begin to imagine what they saw and it just begins to mess up their interactions with the opposite sex. Of course, it slowly captures the soul and eventually the body of the person, whether it's into masturbation, addictive masturbation that leads into acting out some of the things that they have seen. So it captures the soul, captures the thoughts and feelings of these young people in a powerful way in the body as well, and enslaves. Of course, it's addictive. That's the other big thing. It's addictive. So it breaks down all the values and boundaries of self-control. When a child cannot self-control anymore because of what they keep seeing and what they want to do and what their body is screaming for, then it's bad for life. Self-control, once it's broken, it doesn't just show up in sexuality. Lack of it is going to show up with education. It's going to show up in use of technology. Is going to show up in many other ways. So it breaks down values, in short, breaks down values. Of course, it's a very powerful distraction. It's talking to a grown-up man who gave up his phone and gave it to me and said, keep it. I don't want to use it for a few weeks because I almost lost my job because I'd gotten so addicted to porn that both on my computer and on my phone, I would spend hours on it. And I've done no self-control. Instead of doing my reports to my boss or doing my studies or doing something else, this thing is a complete distraction. It's hard to compete, for porn, to compete with studies. Of course, a child, if they're exposed to this and addicted to it, they're going to choose, while they look like they are on their computer doing some work for school, they're going to just divert and go into this pornographic attraction. So it's a distraction. It's such an attractive thing that it becomes a distraction, especially for the young people during this season. It's a distraction. It's a thief. It steals precious time, steals thoughts, because even when they watch and they go to sleep, you find that they don't have sleep because they're still thinking about what they watch and playing it out in their minds because it's very etched into their brain. And they almost can't get away with it. I mean, I've talked to people who are adults who can still remember what they saw the first time when they were kids, what they saw in terms of pornography. And it's just etched into their minds. And it doesn't like want to leave unless, of course, you replace it with more material and more pictures. And so it's a thief. It's a stealer of time and precious time and sleep and other precious things. Of course, it could also lead to criminal behavior. And because a lot of kids, when they see this, they want to act it out and they don't even seek permission. So you find kids being a lot more abusive sexually, touching girls on their breasts or other parts, or touching boys, or doing stuff in school bathroom or out in the car or elsewhere because of what they keep seeing. And so it leads to, of course, destructive sexual behavior, but also sometimes to criminal behavior. It's an invitation to criminal behavior, and pornography and wrong sexual acting out of the same could lead to many other things. Many times it's connected to alcoholism, it's connected to drugs, it's connected to other things that kids get to do so that they may act out some of the things that they got to see. And so it impacts very negatively not only on sexuality, but also on education, on moral values in the society, and many other things. I think we've seen in Kenya kids, acting out these things, and grown-up people acting out these things in criminal ways in the public transport and in school, and kids taking pictures. Recently, there was this crazy, fortunately I didn't watch it, but I was told by those who watched it, of child porn. These two children playing these things out and then, recording themselves. And then they sent to others. These are kids who are less than 10 years old. And because of what they've seen online, it's no big deal. It's not big, so they get to record this and share it with other people. So, of course, it affects the moral fiber of the society, affects the children, affects education, affects a lot of those things that we have talked about. And, of course, these kids are affected in their sexual life into the future. There's some who are right now, and some of you maybe are listening, who are adults and parents who are still, have acted out some things you saw in your childhood, and they have not helped you. Some of you, it's negatively affected your sexual life in terms of marriage because of what is in your mind and what you want to keep trying out. And the excitement and fantasy of that cannot be replicated continuously in real life. And how that, of course, eventually negatively affects you, even in marriage. Of course, it affects the view and dignity of women. As I said earlier, seeing them as sex objects and people to play with. Even when they say no, they don't mean it, because that's what porn shows. So it gives a bad view of humanity in terms of sexuality in this manner. So it has tragic effects, I could go deep into it, but we need a seminar. We need to talk about it, one session after another, get into some of these issues that we are rushing through because we only have 1 hour. In fact, I only have about 10 minutes remaining. But let me try to bring us towards a conclusion, and then I'll pick out a few questions and comments before I close. But for another few minutes, let me give you four S's that would help you to help your child. Some guidelines, 4 words that start with S. So number 1, and you can write this down, and it's going to be helpful. Number 1 is structure. one of the ways to help your children deal with the invitation of social media and the content. You know, the issue about social media and internet, number one is addiction in terms of time, so screen time, and number two is in terms of content. So screen time is very addictive, and content is very addictive and immoral and illegal as well. And so you need to control those two when it comes to internet and social media. So provide the structure that controls the use of technology. So provide the structure of it. And that structure should answer several things. Number one is when. What are the times that internet and social media is available to the children? What time? Between what time and what time? You know, I keep reviewing the rules that our children have signed up to when it comes to technology. And recently I was reviewing that with my son. And of course, we always write it down, agree on it, and then he printed it and we signed it together. And part of it is to address the time. So he knows the time, 8:30, he's 14 years old right now. So 8:30 is when he hands in his phone. Comes to me and it's off until the following morning. So it addresses the times. These are the times that you can use your phone. We're addressing that with my 11-year-old. My daughter is 18, so we can only talk around it as well, what is good. And when it comes to when technology is available and internet available to the kids, let it be within the day. Of course, darkness comes with its own invitations for these young people. So generally, it's not right for 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, your children to be in their rooms and they have access to internet and technology. It's just imagining they have a lot more control than their little brains or immature brains could let me not say little, immature brains could allow them. Because they're immature, they're just children. It's not like they're stupid or wicked, they're just children. They cannot control themselves in certain invitations and attractions. They're immature. So don't believe too much beyond brain science for your children. So when can they have access to internet, and when is it out? So address the structure should address when. Number two, it should address where. Where do they have access to internet and technology? And the general rule there is in open places, not in secret places, not in their behind their closed bedrooms, not behind the doors of the bathroom, of course, for obvious reasons. When they're in there, they have their technology and they have all of these sites they could search. The temptation, especially for young little preteens and teens, the temptation is just immense. So protect them with that structure. Open places. In fact, many times when my son, who gets very attracted, and being a son, of course, it's obvious. I tell them, you know, when you're using your computer, sit in a way that if I walked into the room, then I could see your screen. And it's just to help him and protect him. Of course, structure should address the question who. You know, what age, at what age should I have access to my own device? At what age can I watch what movie? You know, who is permitted to watch what and when? And what are the limits around that? For your daughter, for your son, address who and at what age is supposed to have whatever access. And lastly is what? What content is available? And this is where you need to do parental controls. Thankfully, many gadgets and websites and internet or even social media, some these days are allowing parental control, that you can put parental control and certain material is not accessible anymore on that gadget or in that site or things like that. So you need to know what content could be available for your child. If it's a PG movie, then at what time should it be viewed and who should view, and can you have controls on your screen on the either computer or on your smart TV around those controls. So number one is structure. Make sure you have a structure and guidelines. One of the things we do, a whole chapter in our Intentional Moms program, is to talk about guidelines on technology. And even we get down into the science of it and the power of it. And we give general guidelines, which are generally agreed on by social scientists across the world. And so make sure you have those guidelines which provide the structure around technology on when, where, who, and what. Number two, the second S is supervision. Supervision. Many times parents, especially permissive parents, they feel like, why should I go into all of that? Am I just being a helicopter parent who is just hovering around my children? No. You're being responsible. You can allow your children just to do what their minds tell them to do. You're not going to land them in a safe place. Responsibility as a parent to ensure is you supervise. You check once in a while, you know, what's a history of the phone of your child. One of the things we agree with our children is that I must have access until a certain age, that if they have the fingerprints as a way to access their phones, and mine should be admitted so that once in a while I could just check what is going on. I don't like to do it. It's hard for me to do it. But as a responsible parent, I have got to do it. Otherwise, I'll have neglected my responsibility to my children. And once in a while, I find something, an opportunity to train. One of the things that it helps is when I find a certain picture which looks appropriate, then I get to talk to my daughter or my son and say, you know, this is not appropriate. This is what the boy means. This is where he's taking this to, and this is how you can talk to them. So it's an opportunity to educate, not just to be a bad prefect. It's an opportunity to educate. So supervision is where also parental controls comes in, checking on sites visited and history. Of course, checking the phone regularly to see whether they have downloaded stuff you have agreed should not be downloaded and stuff like that. Securing the gadget. These days, there's some other software available on the internet, and one of it that we have tried before, and we hope to try more in the future, is called, it's on Secure Eyes, or Covenant Eyes, that is the name, sorry. Covenant Eyes, that you can put on the gadgets, several gadgets, and you pay little money for it. And if any of the gadgets accesses nudity or something close to that, you get to put in the words that are not allowed. Then it informs you wherever you are on your gadget. And so it alerts you, and that is important because it helps you know how to guide your children. And of course, under supervision, stay alert to see any change of behavior or a lot more secrecy for your children and stuff like that. So supervision is staying alert, opening your eyes, and making sure you're guiding your children. So number one is structure. Number two is supervision. And I want to invite you to give me a few more minutes. I know what to do until a minute from now. Let me ask you for 5 more minutes just for me to wrap up. So number two is supervision. Number three is shift of focus for the children. You know why children sometimes get so into this, into the games and social media, into pornography, and into all of these other sites they shouldn't be getting into? Because they don't have anything else to do. They don't have much else to do. They've just finished their homework and they have the gadget and there's nothing else on the timetable, so they can explore. So give them creative things to do. You know, sometimes we tell kids, you don't have access to your gadgets, and then they are bored. They have nothing else to do. So have creative alternatives. In other words, create board games. Like tonight, we're going to play with our children board game after this, after dinner. Have other exciting things that they look forward to. So create other activities and hobbies. You know, introduce them into language. Like my kids now are all doing some language things, and in the evening they're doing these things on the internet that helps them practice French and Germany. And that's another attraction that doesn't now allow them to go into other things that they could be doing. So create alternative attraction, whether it's playing together with them, creating new hobbies, doing scramble or things like that. Things you could do, games, monotony. Is it called monotony? The game that teaches your kids about money. And what is the name of it? Is it monotony? Monopoly. Yeah, my daughter is correcting me. Monopoly. Monotony and all of that. But Monopoly, and other games that are available, play them and let them get exciting so that, or snakes and ladders for you or the old timers. But the things that you could begin to play with your children that just give them alternative things that they can get to do. So shift the focus. Find something else useful and exciting that they could do. We have come up with a few other alternative activities with the children. We enjoy them, and I enjoy them as well. Number 4, and lastly, so we're talking about 4 S's that will help you, really help your children around these issues of pornography, social media, and also time management that unfortunately we didn't get to touch on. But we're going to get deeper into this. This is part 1. We will go to other parts and we will be in Zoom so that we can have interactive questions and all of that. Lastly, straight conversations. Have straight conversations. Don't go around the bush. If it's about pornography, we have educated ourselves quite a lot about what is pornography, the journey into it, and several other things. So have a straight conversation about pornography with your children. A little while ago, I had a 1.5 hour drive with my son, and we talked about the 10 tragic effects of pornography. And he still remembers that. And we were candid. And for a boy, I did the drive because boys are very shoulder to shoulder. They're not face to face. It should have been awkward if I was looking into his face and talking those things to him. But we were on the road, and I was looking ahead, and he was giggling on my side as we talked about these things. And I could be candid, and I could be straight and talk with them. So straight conversations with your children about pornography and its effects, and about sexuality and its effects, and other things. Talk about these things. And one of the lessons we teach in intentional dads and intentional moms is sexual education, age-appropriate sex education. What they need to be talks about at what age and how, the values around it. And so you could sign up for that as well. But straight conversations based on, of course, if you don't have any freedom with your children, you don't talk freely about certain things, then you don't just go and sit them down and say, today we're talking about pornography. They'll be dying in shame because you've never made it easy for you to talk about that. So just introduce it slowly if you have not been doing sex education. So by the time you get to the gross issues, then it's not strange to them. It's within character with you because you get to talk about that. So create an open space and conversation between yourselves, which has no shame. Talk to them about the effects of these things and how they don't want to get into those effects. Create open channels so that in case they want to ask you a question and want to talk about some of these things, they know that mom is available and we can talk about this as well. And as you have this straight conversation, of course, for you, the difference between you and the biology teacher and the internet is that you bring in the values. As you teach them about sexuality, about porn, you give the values. You teach them the values. You teach them self-control. You teach them boundaries. You teach them what is good for them. And you warn them of the dangers. So those are the 4 S's that I would like to encourage you. Create the kind of connection where you can have a straight talk and keep these conversations going, age appropriate, at the different levels and exposure. You can continue like that day. One of the ways to know how deep the children have gone, when they ask you a question, ask some questions back. What do you think is is that? And that's what I asked my daughter that day. What do you think is oral sex? And I realized that she didn't know much. And then I got to the depth that she could understand. So ask some questions back so that the conversations could go for you to know how deeply they have been exposed. Your child, let me tell you this, your child is probably a lot more exposed than you think. And so have these conversations. Now, many of you have written some things on the internet, and I just want to mention a few before I close. Someone has said, what tools are there to protect or limit access to these sites? As I said, many sites, there's a place where you can put parental control. In many sites these days that are being used, there's a place for settings where you can put parental control. In many gadgets, even phones. And if you Google that, they can guide you. Google will guide you these days on how to limit access. On smart television sets, there's a place for in the settings for parental control. You can find that. But as I said, if you Google about these softwares that can limit access, there are some, and Covenant Eyes is one of those that you could do that. And I know some of you are asking, oh, my son is right now, my daughter is involved in this, and I don't know where to start the conversation. Well, as I talked about straight talk, there's no other way to go around this. You just need to go to them and say, son or daughter, I was just checking your phone and history, and I realized you access this. And it's just that I know it and I've seen it, and I wanted us to talk about it. It's happened. It's okay. Whatever has happened has happened. Even me in my time at your age, I had some interest, and you could just make it easy to talk about it. So don't just descend on them with punishment. And they'll never talk about it again, and they'll always hide from you. Have the conversation that says, you are into this, you have seen this, but let's talk now. What is the impact? What are the tragic effects? How can we work together for you to deal with this? Recently, one of the dads got to ask me, my son just confessed to me, he's into this. What do I do? I was shocked. And I told him, it's good. You have a son who can confess it. That's a positive. So now sit down and say, thank you for talking to me. But let me tell you some of the ways you can overcome it so that you continue to grow into it. Someone has asked, how does one keep it all age appropriate and ensure that the content does not remain on their mind? As I said, we have some guidelines, and there are some that may be available online that tells you between this age and this age, this is what generally the mind of a child can take in terms of content. So those guidelines are there. We have taken some that we have put in our notes that we give in the training, and we will give in the seminars that we will do, and we'll give you this, and this is generally agreeable to social scientists that before a child is this age, then they can not handle a phone or handle this site or more information than this. So there's that objective age content that can be taught and available. Someone has asked me, just as I close, to briefly state the 4 S's again, and now I have to finish because I've overshot the time. And as I said, just watch this space and this site. Please follow us so that whenever we have a talk like this, you could be informed. Follow us on our different social media, Transform Nations or Intentional Moms Facebook page, or Mothers of Sons Facebook page. Follow us so that you may get to know every time we have a talk like this and a seminar or the classes so that you may join in. But let me just conclude by repeating the 4 S's. S number 1 is structure. Structure around technology. That says that is the times they can use, access internet and use their gadgets, where, open spaces generally, who, what age, your daughter, your son, what they can access and what they can't, and what content is available. So you can tell them what they can do and what they can't do. If it's a YouTube, what they can access and what they can't. So structure. Number 2 is supervision. Make sure your parental controls, you visit and check the history and sites, the phone, what is there on the Instagram and the other social things, platforms they're using. So supervision. Number 3 is shift focus for them. So create a thing that they can do which are exciting so that they are not just hooked into this thing because they have nothing else to do and they're bored. So create other things that focus their attention. And lastly, have straight conversations, age appropriate straight age conversations. And sometimes age appropriate goes to the next level. So you go further than the age appropriate guidance because they've already been exposed. If your child is 4 years old or 5 years old and they're already exposed to pornography, then you've got to talk about it way beyond their age. And so I'm just saying, there's the age-appropriate guidance, and I said it's available on the internet, and some sites, they have the training, and we train it in our parental programs, but in case the exposure is earlier than that, because these age limits keep going down, and sometimes your child gets, goes further because of the exposure and who they're hanging out with. And that's another thing I should say. Please know who is hanging out with your children, because peer pressure is real. And if certain kids who are hanging out with your kid is exposed to this, your child would definitely get exposed to, get exposure to that. So straight talk and conversations. And make sure that the conversation is real. You're not hiding it, and make sure it's not just about you can't do this, you should not do this. Make sure it's a healthy conversation. Well, I've run out of time for our conversation. Thank you all of you for joining us. As we told you, next week we are launching a new session of Intentional Moms. In case you want to sign up for that online, you can do that. Intentional Dads is also beginning online. In case you want to sign in, the father of your children, you could do that as well. And there are other programs we have that are available, and you can see all of that information and places to sign up, links to sign up on our social media platform, Facebook right now. Well, thank you very much. Don't be worried. Don't beat yourself a lot if you catch your child, deep into some of these issues. Talk to someone else. Feel free to interact with us. We can have that conversation. And Sophie as well, who is my wife and a trainer for mothers and parents. And we'll be available in case you really want to get, or you want, personalized conversation and maybe coaching for your child who is already deep into this, get to access us. I believe our email addresses, Esther and Brenda will make them available on our site, and you could get to talk to us and we see what we can do. But let's continue this parenting thing. Parenting is a gift. It's a blessing. It has its challenges, but it is what God uses for us to shape our children into responsible adults. So may the Lord bless you. Remember what the Bible says in Proverbs: train up a child in the way that they should go. And when they grow up, even if they deviate from it, they'll never forget it. They'll never forget. They'll know that mom used to tell me this and mom tells me this. And when they go into the negative effects, they'll remember what you taught them. So you're training them in what is right is not in vain. God bless you. Have a good night. Let's not give up on our children. Let's continue to do what is right as we guide them. God bless you.